Hello team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is well, I don't know what this is, because at the moment Stephen is in Kiev trying to join in on this conversation, but his phone is not giving him permission to use the camera and microphone. He's having an issue trying to sort out actually connecting. He's there and he's ready and he's waiting. But unfortunately, and he's willing, but he's just not able. So what I might do, I've just done my hits and losses video. I've been out at the bank with my parents. My dad is recently diagnosed with dementia, so having to sort out some things, future planning for my parents. So I've been out all morning, and I've just finished recording my hits and losses video. That will evidently come out after this video. What I'll probably do then, this is really good news that Benny Pie has introduced me to this add-on. For at the moment, I use Microsoft Edge because it is less hungry for my mapping. So there's an add-on that they have that you can copy and paste whole lists of links in, and it turns it into links. Just one click, and all that list of links then becomes tabs at the top. So I have just opened up my tabs of military aid, and I can do that with geopolitics. So this might just turn into a live military aid and geopolitics video, news video. And if Stephen can join in, then he will. So I guess that's how it's going to have to be, and we'll see. So he says, yeah, I don't know how to get it fixed. I've told him to turn it off and on. Of course, that's surely going to solve it. But anyway, let's go for it. Your team, you're the team. You are there. I am here. Let's talk about stuff concerning Ukraine. Okay, we'll go to. This is rough and ready. You know what I'm like. All my stuff is rough and ready. Anyway, we're going to start with. I presume there's no audio on any of these, so that's lucky that you won't get me struggling with the audio. We're going to go through military aid and equipment assistance to Ukraine. Now, because I've just pasted all of these tabs into the top, I would normally put them in a sensible order. As I go through each of them, they will not be in a sensible order, and I do apologize for that. So we might have some Russian news in the middle of Ukrainian news. I just wanted to highlight that we are moving into the autumn now, in terms of very much so the weather and the boggy conditions that come with that, and that might severely affect what's going on the front lines. So we might have a different numbers in terms of losses for either side, and you might think, oh, they're not attacking, or something's happened, or this or that. Well, actually the reason could well be the weather, and I often forget to calculate the impact of the weather when I'm theorizing in the morning. So if I do forget, please remind me. The weather could be very important. Now, here is, I just thought I'd throw this one in. This is a drum system of projectile discharge. There are all sorts of different ways that drones are going to be evolving in this war. We have seen the range of drones being adapted to, as we've seen that evolving as they're using maybe repeater drones or just getting better range in and of themselves. Repeater drones taking the signal and boosting it like an internet repeater might at your home. It then boosts it onto the drone. So you could have a larger drone, a mothership drone that drops that first person view drone or whatever it is to then go and fly off. And it uses the mother drone as basically its internet source, if you like, its signal source. And that then can double the range of your drone activity. So that's one way of adapting. Here we have adaptations to how they are releasing their IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Here we have a rotational sort of drum system that looks really, really clever. And yeah, that allows 5 bombs to be dropped. Different ways of adapting. Electronic warfare countermeasures on board will be further adaptations, and this war is seeing a real change in warfare in so many ways. And this is the kind of stuff, that the innovation that you're seeing in these workshops in Ukraine, where allies and indeed enemies, adversaries, are going to be looking and going, right, what can we learn from this? How should the Chinese be looking at going, right, get onto that, guys, let's do that. So interesting. Right. As I say, these are all in a completely random order at the moment. Ukraine has received almost $300 million in concessional financing from Canada. The funds have already reached the state budget, according to Denis Shmyhal, the Prime Minister. I did report on something similar yesterday, that they were going to get financing. That was in a form of a loan. I don't know if this is the same one, whether that was... Yeah, this is the loan that's gone into their coffers, but that's obviously going to be good news. Now, Zelensky has said that China is helping Russia to prolong the war. Zelensky says, "We are receiving signals that China is actively helping Russia drag out this war." President Zelensky said on October the 17th, citing clear intelligence data. Speaking at European Council, the president said that Moscow is also receiving support from Iran, as well as arms and personnel from North Korea. So, what is going on with regard to this axis of evil? What are we doing as allies about this? Do these not surely represent red lines that have been crossed? I would argue yes. By the way, there's an excellent excerpt. I played it on my hits and losses video. I'll probably dig it out because I can't play sound unless I do something funky here. I'll play you what he's just said to Meet the Press, which is basically, live on American TV. He's calling Putin an effing terrorist. It was just a delightful drop the mic moment from Zelensky there. Okay, a Ukrainian warship has been put to sea for tests, and I presume this is the second one. So the Turkish on the Black Sea are making 2 Ukrainian corvettes, and I think they're stuffing them with a load of tech as well. So this corvette, this one is Hetman Ivan Mazepa, built in Turkey, has been put to sea for sea trials. According to published footage, a torpedo was fired from the corvette during the tests, and a helicopter landing training was also held. Now, I do wonder exactly what these are going to be used for. Like, my opinion is that these are going to be very capable ships, but as soon as you let them range outside of Turkish territorial waters, they are going to be target number one for the Russians, and the Russians are just going to be throwing everything at these brand new corvettes, Ukrainian corvettes. You can bet your bottom dollar that Russia is going to be eyeing them up. So, one, how do you safeguard them, and then 2, what do you use them for? There are 2 corvettes. You still got a large amount of the Black Sea fleet ships left for the Russians. It's not like 2 corvettes can go and take all of them out. So, I don't know how they're going to utilize these ships. Let me know in the live comments if you've got any ideas as to how these are going to be utilized, given their what surely must be huge vulnerabilities. Even though they might be brilliant ships, really well made, packed full of loads of tech and useful weaponry on board, etc., etc. Can the Ukrainians effectively prevent them? When you got, I would have thought the Russians would be like, as soon as that's moored, they're going to be thinking, let's release as many Kinzhal missiles on that bad boy as possible. Right, United States have announced. Now, this is pretty big news. This is big news that came out last night. US announced a $425 million aid package for Ukraine, which includes, quote, additional air defense, air-to-ground munitions, armored vehicles, and other critical munitions. This is really good news. It's a slightly larger package than we have seen of late. The Americans have given seemingly smaller and smaller packages, sort of $250 million packages, $200 million. This is 425. It's pretty sizable, and it has quite a few vehicles in. We're looking at it in a little bit more detail in a second. A bit of feedback from you guys in the live chat. The corvettes are for after the war is over, and absolutely. And I wonder whether they're just going to keep them locked away in Turkish waters until after the war. But it's such a shame that they'd have such amazing capabilities, but effectively completely unable to use them. They may stay in NATO waters except for specific operations. Interesting. And of course, if you take them out of the Bosphorus Straits, they ain't coming back in because of the Montreux Convention. So if they leave the Black Sea, you can't get them back. Right, let's find some more info. I just need to find some more info on, yes, here we have some actually. In the coming months, this is a quote taken from the readout President Biden's call with President Zelensky. So they had a telephone call after which was announced this $425 million package. Quote, in the coming months, the US will provide Ukraine with a range of additional capabilities, including hundreds of air defense interceptors, dozens, so those are the missiles you fire from NASAMS or Patriot or whatever, dozens of tactical air defense systems. Don't know what that would be. System could be anything from an Avenger on the back of a Humvee, and we'll come to that in a second, or it could mean a Patriot or a NASAMS or all of the above. Additional artillery systems, significant quantities of ammunition, hundreds of APCs and IFVs, and thousands of additional armored vehicles. So the thousands is apparently 2,000 Humvees have been added to a pledge list. Hundreds of the APCs and IFVs. So I presume we're going to see also things like strikers and strikers and similar vehicles for Bradleys. Sorry, I had a slight brain fart there. I want to just go to some. I'm sure I've got some more. Oops, I've just accidentally got rid of that because I'm a bit special. So let's get that back. There was a pledge list I've got. Here we go. Right. So Jeff2146, who does a kind of Oryx style document, Google document spreadsheet, says 2,000 high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, Humvees, infantry mobility vehicles have been added to the list, and one Patriot air defense battery is an older pledge, but only now added to the US aid fact sheet. So 2,000 Humvees is going to be super useful. Now, I don't know if I've got another one here. Black Sea Fleet. No. So one of the other lists of, we'll get to it a bit later. One of the other lists of American aid going from this $425 million package includes a large amount of air defense systems. I'll try and find the aid package because it will be useful. There is a list, because I was doing a bit of speculation in my head, US aid package, and thought that you might start seeing, here we go, it's 4 hours. So this one. Okay, brilliant. So here we have capabilities include additional munitions for NASAMS. So actually, when I said the interceptors, it seems like NASAMS. Also RIM-7. So RIM-7 are anti-aircraft Sea Sparrow missiles that were fired from ships that have been adapted to be fired from the Buk air defense system. So the Frank and Sam air defense systems, RIM-7 are one of the, they are the missiles that generally fire from that. Right. Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. And this is what I am wondering, because you've got air to ground. Oh no, that's air to ground munition. You've got Humvees, and I was wondering whether part of this idea that they're going to receive a bunch of tactical air defense systems. I wonder whether they're going to put Stingers together with Humvees. So they're getting 2,000 Humvees. But I wonder if they can, out of that 2,000, whether 100 of them could be Avengers. So if we look at what Avengers are, Avenger air defense. So these are Humvees with Stingers basically attached to them. 8 Stinger pods there, or 2 pods of 4 Stinger missiles. Now, I don't know whether my speculation is remotely sensible or not, but I'd imagine, I was thinking, this is how cool I am. Last night, as I was trying to get to sleep at like 1 o'clock last night, 1:30 last night, I had a late one. I was thinking, well, out of that 2,000, imagine you get 200 Avengers, and then those Stingers can then be applied. Well, you could use them more widely along the front line to support your troops and taking out close air support Russian planes that are flying close to the front line. Obviously not things that are dropping planes that are dropping your guided glide bombs. They're 50 to 70 kilometers behind the contact line, but close air support. Or you could litter those around the country and use them to improve what is already a vastly improved network of air defenses. Another couple of hundred of these, I think, would be really, really useful. Anyway, you get all your normal stuff like spare parts, HIMARS, munitions, javelins, so anti-tank guided missiles, small arms, grenades, thermals, training equipment, demolition stuff, air-to-ground munition, artillery ammunition, blah, 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 blah. So all of that stuff is included. So a fairly sizable package. Interesting that although we've got the Humvees there, it doesn't mention your infantry fighting vehicles and your APCs. So that's interesting because we have seen that elsewhere. I presume that will be given as well, but who knows? Right, leader of the German opposition, Friedrich Merz, has been quite vocal recently, and he seems to be taking a much stronger position against Russia than Olaf Scholz, the SPD leader and coalition leader, in fact, chancellor. So this guy's likely to be the next chancellor if in the elections that will take place next year. Now, if that is the case, this kind of rhetoric is excellent news. So the CDU is the Christian Democratic Union, which is the traditional centre-right party of Angela Merkel. That is the opposition. And I have a feeling that he senses Olaf Scholz being a bit soft, and there's a political advantage to be extracted from this kind of rhetoric. So if he's not pandering to the AfD, which is great, and he's not pandering to the BSW on the far left. So the far right and far left are kind of anti-Ukraine aid. He's saying, right, if we want to win this election, let's not cozy up with the AfD. Let's try and get our traditional voters back in the center ground. But like I'm always talking to you about what the Republicans and Democrats, well, the Democrats are trying to do that. The Republicans aren't in the US. Labour did that in the UK. Go to the centre ground, get the voters back, win the election, or get those swing voters, win the election, and nick some from the other side. Here, this is likely to make people in the centre go, "Oh, I really strongly support the Ukraine." And if support of Ukraine is one of my big elements of who I'm going to vote for, then Merz's his rhetoric is going to attract a number of voters and help them in the elections. So he's saying that Germany should put an ultimatum on Russia, a 24-hour ultimatum to stop the bombing of civilian infrastructure. You've got 24 hours to stop that, and if you continue that, then in the case of non-fulfillment of the requirement, we will remove the limitation of the range of weapons and transfer Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Like I talked about before, I think that is a really sensible idea. We need to be taking the red lines to the Russians and not vice versa. Okay, we've heard that the Ramstein meeting is now going to go ahead, but it will be a virtual meeting that's taking place by Zoom. By unsecured Zoom, so anyone can tap in. No, and it's going to be 5. Italy, I believe, are in on this now. So you got the big 5: US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, and they. Oh no, sorry, that is a meeting possibly with Biden, which, yeah. So the Ramstein is going to be all the leaders, though. It will be those 5 I just mentioned, but many other leaders as well. So the Ramstein meeting. Sorry, I'm getting my knickers in a twist. The Ramstein meeting is going to be held virtually in November, I do believe. So that's good news there. Ukraine will build a factory. This is fascinating. So we've heard a lot about inward investment into Ukraine of people like BAE Systems, Rheinmetall, Northrop Grumman, so on and so forth. All these big military industrial concerns setting up shop in Ukraine. Now we've got a Ukrainian concern setting up in Lithuania potentially. So Ukraine will build a factory for the production of new generation explosives in Lithuania. Reports the Ministry of Economy of Lithuania. Construction of the hexagon explosives RDX plant is expected to begin next year. I've just heard from Stephen Bendal. It's a pity. I've tried it all I can think of. We'll have to do it when I'm back in Norway. It's such a shame, mate. Such a shame. This will strengthen the defense capabilities of Ukraine, Lithuania, and Europe, as the explosives will be used to produce a variety of munitions. Interesting. And we have. I thought I'd include this because I've been wondering how to feel at the moment. I'm a little bit up and down, like I have been, like many of you have been over the course of this war. So it's challenging at the moment, isn't it? So the Ukrainians are under a hell of a lot of pressure on the eastern front line and the southern front line, actually, the southeastern front line. And at the same time, you've got, I think, almost entirely as a result of the elections in the US, you've got a lack of urgency and help from the US and a lack of lifting of restrictions. I think if there hadn't been this period of elections, and my goodness, the Americans know how to string them out. We call snap elections and it's over in like 3 weeks, bish bash bosh. Americans are like, oh, we got 3 weeks, that's too short, there's not long left, oh my god, panic time. I'm like, man, we had our entire campaign in 3 weeks. France called a snap election, had it done by the weekend type thing. Like, but anyway, it's this really protracted period where I think the hot potato that is Ukraine is something that the Democrats don't really want to talk about too overtly. And as a result, and they don't want to do anything that might endanger them winning the election. Lifting restrictions might do that for whatever reason. They've deemed that as like, it's a bit dangerous, and we don't want to be seen to be inviting an even greater escalation. And that Russia would also recognize, being the election period, that they would massively big up the fact that the US had lifted restrictions, and that would have been Biden and Harris, and the Russians would have been throwing disinformation into the information spaces that would have been playing to Trump's hand there. So as a result, I think the US has just been really, really quiet on Ukraine, and that is to the detriment of Ukraine, obviously. Now I understand why it's happening, and it's not ideal, but that's the reality of politics, right? Now that leaves my mood going up and down. It's like, oh my god, what's going on here? Then I'm like, oh, Mirage is on the way. Oh, brilliant! And there's more Mirages, excellent, and big package actually that is, you know, quietly accepted coming from the US, and more Bradleys and loads of Humvees. Yes, I'm great. Oh, but you know, they're losing ground here, and I'm up and down like a yo-yo, and people saying, oh, what are the UK doing? The UK are trying to do lots. The rhetoric is there, the will is there, but we don't have anything really in the cupboard because of underfunding and procurement issues. And then the idea is that actually there's also not that much money left in the piggy bank, so on and so forth. So I do wonder about you know, where the British in terms of help. EU seem to be doing a pretty good job, but it's like turning a tanker. Here, the MOD. So this is the official line from the British Ministry of Defence. We must do all we can to strengthen Ukraine. As President Zelensky said in London last week, this is a critical period in the war. Now, that's just a tweet on Twitter, right? But actually, that's really important. That's the MOD saying, guys, remember, we must do all we can to strengthen Ukraine. All we can. This is not like, you know, we're in this for as long as it takes. Like, but you know, this is, we must do all we can. And so that, at least, like, are we doing all we can? It's a question. I don't know, but at least like the rhetoric is there, which reflects surely some kind of political will. And this is a time where lots of people are getting jittery and throwing out appeasement rhetoric. And I'm just happy to see that the British MOD at least are saying, yeah, this is a critical time. We've got to stay strong. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Now, Ukraine is unlikely to have a full squadron of F-16 fighter jets by the end of this year, with the expected timeline pushed to spring or summer 2025. According to the Wall Street Journal, this is, the US has shifted training focus from experienced pilots to younger cadets, delaying the arrival of the full squadron. So interesting one there. I mean, people saying this is a deliberate delay. They've abandoned Ukraine. I don't know that would at all be the case. But there are challenges with retraining pilots that are experienced pilots on Soviet era airframes, and then getting them to become just as good pilots on the F-16. And actually, Justin Bronker's spoken about this a number of times, the Royal United Services Institute air expert, military air expert. He says actually it's really difficult to take, is much more difficult than you think, to take people who have operated on Soviet airframes and train them on F-16s. And it is actually easier to take the younger pilots and train them up because you can't unlearn some of it, and they are so different. So those who want to bash the US will bash the US for this. It's not that I don't want to bash the US. It's just that there are, like, my theory is always that there are good reasons people do things, right? It's very often, it's never, sorry, the opposite. It's never going to be the case that the US are going to sit there and go, right, how can we most screw over Ukraine? I'll tell you what, we're training their really experienced pilots. Let's not train those, and let's instead focus on training their newbies, because that will screw them up. Like, that is not going to be the case. So when you get an opinion like this is a deliberate delay. The political elites have abandoned Ukraine already and speculate how to do business with Putin after the war. I just think that's absolute nonsense. Now, it's quite nice to believe in conspiracy theories and how, you know, things are contriving to work in this kind of way, but I just, honestly, that is the least probable explanation of events. It really is. It's much more likely that, as you know, because you can listen to an expert like Justin Bronk and say, okay, thanks for that, Justin Bronk. I'm going to ignore that and just say that they're doing this to screw over the Ukrainians. Or I can listen to something that Justin Bronk has said that is based on his knowledge, his intimate knowledge of training pilots on these systems, and say, actually, it seems to be that it's more probable that the explanation is that this is a more sensible way to train the pilots, to take the young ones and train them up straight away on NATO equipment and leave those experienced pilots. We've taken some of the best pilots and we've already trained them on the F-16, and we're already going to be training on the Mirage as well. Those experienced pilots that are left, let's leave them flying MiG-31s and Su-24s and whatever, leave them doing that, because otherwise we're going to have to train up newbies on those old Soviet kits. Well, what's the point of doing that? Let's leave some experienced pilots flying those legacy airframes and take the newbies in and straightway train them on NATO stuff. That's a much, much better explanation of events. And, you know, you can disagree with me if you want, but you're wrong. No, I mean, honestly, it's just like, it's so easy to be overly critical and look for ways of slagging, like, particularly the US off, that I think is often unjustified. I will slag off the US, like, not lifting restrictions, I think is weak. Jake Sullivan, weak. You know, anti-escalation, weak, right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to slag off the US administration, or in this case, this won't be the administration's not going to be interested. Like, Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden are not going to be making decisions on which pilots get trained in the Air Force. That is not their remit. They say, right, DOD, you go and deal with this. We want pilots trained. You go and make the best decisions. And the DOD goes away and they make the best decisions based on their knowledge, right, and their strategic objectives, which isn't, I know you might like to think they might be, but their strategic objectives aren't going to be, let's screw over the Ukrainians as much as possible. Because if that was their strategic objective, they wouldn't train the pilots at all, right? It's annoying. Yes, I advise people do watch Justin Bronk. He is brilliant. So Viggo Holmson says there are three categories of pilots: experienced, civilian, green recruits. The timetable is different for all three. Absolutely. And I just think it just makes a lot more sense at the moment to now start concentrate on training newbies and putting newbies through the NATO systems. Okay. Here we have a Russian MOD video showing Black Sea Fleet. So remember, Samuel Bendet previously did a thread, or showed us a few videos of people training, Russian personnel training in helicopters to drop anti-drone drones, usually anti-sea drones, from the helicopter. So they would then go and fly and find these Magura V5s like that and then blow them up. Here, interestingly, they are doing them launching from ships, but that Magura V5 is apparently a captured Ukrainian one. Remember, we've seen a number washed up. That very first one that was washed up, presumably because Musk had turned off the geofenced Starlink and it lost contact when they thought they had it, and then they couldn't do that that attack on Crimea. That led to our first visuals of one of the early Magura V5 drones. Here we have the captured Magura being used to help them train on anti-USV drone capabilities, USV being unmanned sea vehicle. Right, Lithuania has agreed to a new aid package for Ukraine worth 3.5 billion. Now, 3.5 billion euros, which is almost $4 billion, is an absolutely massive amount for Lithuania. So this is Gabrielas Landsbergis, who is a brilliant proponent of support for Ukraine. The foreign minister has expressed support for Zelensky's peace plan and urged not to delay the decision on granting permission to Ukraine on the use of long-range weapons. He's well up for supporting Ukraine. Now, that is a huge amount. I can't imagine that is going to be immediate. That will be over a period, I would have thought. I would like to know the details of this from Lithuania, but that's an absolutely staggering amount of money for the size of the country that is. Okay, so that is what I have for the military aid. I'm now going to go on to geopolitics. I'm going to close all that down. In fact, yeah, I'm going to close that down. So that's the end of that. And now you have me back again. And while we just merrily chat to each other, I am going to move tabs around and just do some funky stuff and just fill this empty time with banal conversations about nothing. Okay, so let's present that, share that screen, window, bish bash bosh. There you go, share. Okay, so this is it. I'm now going to copy and paste all my geopolitics links in. Now, these will not, I work hard to put these in a really coherent order every day, so things run onto each other. But as I paste them all into the browser, I don't have time to do that. So I've pasted a whole bunch of links. It's all at one. This has saved me so much time, by the way, finding this add-on. It's absolutely brilliant. Right. I don't know if there have been some brilliant comments in the live chat. I hope there have been. I'm sure you guys are looking after each other and discussing things with the requisite respect. Kevin Forst, thank you so much for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics, ATGM, all these acronyms. Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate that, matey. And Johnny as well, some Danish love there, gifting a membership there. And I was Danish, sorry, Norwegian. What an insult to you, Johnny. Some Norwegian love there. To Karma, indeed. Actually, there's some Norwegian support from Johnny for obviously Stephen Bendal, who couldn't make it to this live stream, which is about Stephen Bendal, but it's not. Sorry, Stephen. What a shame. Right, where are we going to start? Oh no, don't want to start talking about Elon Musk. Goodness me. Right, we're going to start here, but again, just to remind you, the order is completely screwed. Now, big news today is that Zelensky is outlining the victory plan to politicians in Brussels. He added later that the big five, this is the big five, that's what they're going to do with the supply. So part of the five, remember, the 5 elements were, give them equipment. One of them was deterrence, and that would require nations putting some big old, in this case, non-nuclear, conventional, massive, I would have thought, air defense systems. So maybe just putting a whole bunch of Patriot systems on Ukrainian soil as a kind of as allied forces. So the big five, USA, UK, Germany, France, and Italy, supplying non-nuclear deterrent to protect Ukraine. He spoke for, I think, some 10 minutes there on the victory plan. One of the aspects of the first point, remember there are 3 secret annexes as well that he can't talk about. But the first point was about immediate accession to NATO. And there have been a number of NATO personnel members who have said, oh, we can't do that. That's too soon. But then you've had a number of countries like Sweden who have said, actually, we're up for that. And the idea that it's too soon, I think, is about political will. And it might not be about, okay, you have the full access to NATO 5, Article 5 from NATO's charter or whatever. It might not be that you're that kind of member, but that we make a new membership stratum for you. Maybe that can be achieved. But the idea that people put, I remember when I used to teach, and you go and speak with other teachers, you're like, I've got this idea of how we can improve things, and almost always, you know who there'd be, people who are stuck in their ways. Oh, that's a really good idea, Jono, but And it's like, it's the old classic, I'm not racist, but, oh, here comes some overt racism. Like, yeah, it's a really good idea, but okay, right. So just change. You don't like change. So I would imagine there's going to be some of that going on in NATO, which is like, oh, no, we can't really do that. Well, freaking change the rules then. It's your organization. Just, sort out a way that Ukraine can get into NATO so that it is protected in some way, and that acts as a deterrent to Russia so that they don't do things to Ukraine again in a similar vein. Right, again, out of order here, but you're out of order, mate. Russia is thought to be behind 2 arson attacks at DHL, so that's a delivery service, DHL global warehouses in the UK and Germany. Both incidents happened in July. These are apparently packages that have caught on fire that were going to go onto aeroplanes that would have brought down those aeroplanes. Now, serious point here. All my points are serious, right? This is the kind of the analogy would be attempted murder and murder, right? If my intention is to murder you and I come at you with a gun and fire off all the shots, but I missed them all, but I'm truly trying to hit you, then I go to prison for attempted murder. And actually, there's not a massive. I don't know. I'd have to look at the sentencing, but in my eyes, there's not an awful lot of difference between attempted murder and murder, because I was literally able, willing, and trying to murder you, and it just didn't come off. But actually, the intention is the same. The intention of a successful murder and an attempted murder are the same. So if we can prove that Russia have been behind putting packages on UK and German airlines that would explode and cause, one would assume, those airlines to fall out of the sky, that is an act of frickin' war. Like, this is really serious, guys. This is really, really serious. For those joining in the video, I'm not speaking live to Stephen in Kiev because he was unable to join due to technical issues. But this is super serious. If the Russians are doing stuff like this, in my books, that's a red line that's been crossed, and we should be like, that's an act of, that's terrorism. That is state terrorism on our shores. Like, when does an act of war, why wouldn't that be an act of war? And of course, the only reason it wouldn't be is if you were afraid of conflict, and that's bona fide justified, which is like, I really don't want to go to war. It's going to cause loads of deaths. But the problem with that is you just say, well, you can pretty much do anything you want. You can murder Litvinenko in London with polonium, and you can attempt to kill Sergei Skripal in Salisbury with Novichok. That's fine by us. We'll just put a couple of sanctions on. You can try and blow up one of our planes. That's fine. We'll just put sanctions on, because we don't want to escalate towards an all-out war, because that will require us sending troops to die fighting against Russia. So I understand that kind of anti-escalation. I get that. But at some point, surely there's got to be a moment where you go, that's enough. And if it isn't a case of that's enough for us to commit to war against Russia, then surely it's enough to allow Ukraine to do anything they bloody want. We are in a very lucky position as allies of Ukraine, in that Ukraine is doing all the heavy lifting in this war. But I would maintain we are having a war with Russia. I've said this before. You can call it a proxy war. I've called it a proxy war before, but that is a bit of a pejorative term. Like, you are using Ukraine. Like, you're pushing them to do it. We didn't push them to do that. Russia invaded, and then we've got involved in supporting Ukraine. So it's become a sort of proxy war, but slightly different as we'd typically understand it. But we are involved in an information war with Russia, a cyber war with Russia, a political war with Russia, an economic war with Russia, and a conventional war where we are providing everything but troops on the ground to Ukraine. In fact, we are providing troops on the ground because our special forces are over there. Just fact. So if Ukraine have said to us, we're happy to do the fighting, just give us all the kit. If we are still going, not sure about doing this, or we're giving you this and this and this, but not sure about that. If Russia are trying to blow our planes up, then it's like, do you know what, Ukraine? You can have freaking everything you want, and you can fire as deep into Russia as you bloody well want, because they're trying to blow our planes up out of the sky. this is a serious bit of news, and I think I don't know. Is my rant justified, guys? So let's see what someone says. JP says Deco, murder or attempted murder have the same seriousness. This is my point. This is a system failure, failing political systems. Absolutely. I really think that's the case. Thank you very much, Johnny, for the super sticker. By the way, that's some Danish love. We got some Norway. No, it's different Johnnies. Of course, it's different Johnnies. That's what's confusing me. That's why I said Danish love from Johnny Nedregard. But actually, I was really thinking of Johnny Christensen. Thanks, Johnnies. Let's be all three Johnnies together. Really kind of you. Thank you. But yeah, going back to this point, I think this is such an incredibly important event here, and I would love to know the details of this. Hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of this as quick as possible, because that's huge. Right, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has responded to Zelensky's victory plan, stating he has his own decisions that will not change. Oh, what a surprise! Tourists not going. Actually, to be fair, Germany do an awful lot, right? Scholz does get a bum rap. He gets a really hard time of it, but actually Germany have done an incredible amount, and we must remember that. Speaking before the EU summit in Brussels, he emphasized the importance of solidarity and support for Ukraine, focusing on providing the means for its defense. Yep, I'd say Taurus is part of that, but you know, hey ho. Zelensky has said today that the victory plan includes placing conventional missile capabilities, that's what I was talking about, in Ukraine that would either force Russia to accept negotiations or decimate Moscow's military targets. Interesting. So now we're talking about allied missile capabilities that have offensive capabilities and working on behalf of the Ukrainians to take out Russian targets. Quote, we propose placing on Ukraine land a deterrence package that would either force Russia to participate in real negotiations or could allow the destruction of its military targets, Zelensky said, presenting the plans. Now, the issues for many people will undoubtedly be that's getting NATO involved in the war, right? Directly by having missile systems inside Ukraine. And the implication here is placing them on Ukrainian land, which the implication here is that these are NATO systems placed on or allied systems placed on Ukrainian land, but effectively would they not therefore be used by those allied countries to do that work, which is to get these nations involved in the war. But I wonder whether Zelensky's position is, well, look, if we want the war to end, they need to be suitably afraid of these allied nations actually being much more formally part of the war. That is itself the deterrence, and that's why they'll end up coming to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, Putin has his own lackeys. Hoping for a treat from his Russian masters, says the Kiev Post, Putin's pet prime minister of Slovakia announces his upcoming trip to Moscow, saying, quote, there's no evidence regarding Russia's Bucha massacre, and he's a big supporter of restoring relations with Russia. This is Robert Fico of the Smear Party in Slovakia denying this is basically a Holocaust denier, essentially a different iteration of this is a butcher massacre denier. You couldn't get any more pro-Russian than that, any more Russian propaganda than that. That is disgusting, and I am absolutely not a fan of that. But yeah, Aussie Bugger said, so going back, by the way, to the taking out of the Russian plane, what would Russia hope to gain from taking down a civilian airline? And this is a really good point, by the way. So the counter argument against Russia actually doing this is that, well, that's what do they get from doing that? Russian actions are always logical, it seems silly to me, and only likely to provoke further Western action or unity. So this could be a psyops. It could even be Ukrainians doing this to try and provoke, but that sounds a bit like dangerous to suggest those kind of things. I don't know. It's a really good point from Aussie Bugger, though, and one that we should definitely consider. But we do know that Russian interference activities are getting bigger and more widespread. That is being reported by all the intelligence agencies. So on the one hand, yeah, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But on the other hand, they are doing stuff. They did stuff just before the Olympics, remember? They appeared to have sabotaged Western, like French and German logistics. Kevin says, based on the alarming new intelligence reports, the White House believed that there's a 50% chance Russia would use a tactical nuclear weapon, striking assessment that had skyrocketed up from 5%. I don't know if that's coming from Bob Woodward's book War, where there were thoughts. One of the, I think, revelations that came out of that is that back towards the beginning of the war, they were genuinely thinking the Russians were going to use a tactical nuke. So when we talk about Jake Sullivan and escalation management, if you were of the mind that the Russians were that close to using a tactical nuke, then that explains why people like Jake Sullivan are being as careful as they are. Because you get it wrong, you've got a nuclear war. You've got a nuclear war, you've potentially got mutually assured destruction. Right. Sweden, on the other hand, does support Ukraine's victory plan and its future membership of NATO, according to the Swedish MOD. The Minister of Defense said the victory plan will be discussed at the evening meeting in Brussels. However, accession is not yet timely as Ukraine is in a state of war. So while Sweden does support accession to NATO, they say not now. My point earlier is like, yeah, but it doesn't, and this has been touted by some people. It doesn't have to be the full accession. You could give them partial accession, and then they can work towards that greater accession as things are put in place. Yeah, so Telegraph reporting that Russia was suspected of planting that incendiary device. So we'll find out. Michael Weiss, quoting from The Guardian, says counter-terrorism police are investigating whether Russian spies planted an incendiary device on a plane to Britain that later caught fire at a DHL warehouse in Birmingham. So it appears that one in Birmingham had gone on the plane, come off the plane, and then caught fire after the plane had landed. So I wonder if that was from Germany. Okay, now talking of the victory plan, and I do apologize again that I'm all over the place here. Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, pausing my vacation briefly to share some brief thoughts about the summary of Zelensky's victory plan, which he unveiled today in Kyiv, and argued that, if realized, could end Russia's next war. Like his peace plan, it's less a roadmap with clear implementation than it's a wish list, which is why Western partners were not very impressed when presented recently in Washington and EU capitals. Even many Ukrainian MPs, troops, and members of civil society expressed disappointment, as the plan's success hinges almost entirely on the West fully buying into it, and immediately. Right. My first, this is kind of being rather negative. My view would be, of course it bloody is. They can't have victory without Western help. So, of course, the peace plan is going to be contingent on Western help. And if you want to wrap this up in 2025, that help needs to be there immediately, now. This is about political will. So this really pisses me off. Like, I think this is a bit, someone's just trying to be difficult. And also, whether it's Christopher Miller, all those politicians who expressed disappointment, were not very impressed. What kind of plan? Will you draw up a plan for Ukraine to succeed with just what they've got now? If they could succeed now with what they got, they'd be freaking doing it, you dimwits. So if genuinely, and I am just going off on one here, but it really does annoy me that you could sit there and go, oh, I'm not very impressed with that. Well, that means that we have to provide you with this, and we have to do this straight away. Well, yeah, says Ukraine. Yeah, like, we've got tens of thousands of people dying over there. So yeah, we'd like it straight away, thank you. And B, of course we need your help. If we didn't, we would have won the war already. We clearly haven't won the war, precisely because we need your help, and we need it more than ever. And more of it, thank you very much. And the ability to strike deep into Russia, and more ATACMS, and more Storm Shadows, and more planes, and more tanks, more infantry fighting vehicles, and more Patriot systems, and more weapon systems that can fire into Russia. So it just blows my mind. Because you can read this, like, if you didn't know any better, right, and you weren't an expert on Ukraine, like we all are, right, armchair experts, you would read this and go, oh, Ukraine are really bloody whinging, or they're really wanting stuff, or they're being unrealistic, or it's like, dude, you either have a victory plan or not. And if you do, it is going to be immediate help from the West. That's what's going to be in it. Get over it. Zelensky said himself today, quote, "This plan can be implemented. It depends on our partners." Yeah, it can be done. It depends on our partners. It depends on their political will. If you want to get this thing wrapped up, more stuff right now. Thank you very much. Otherwise, less stuff takes longer. It's freaking obvious. This protracted war is precisely because they haven't had enough kit soon enough. It's bloody obvious. Zelensky is absolutely freaking correct here. This plan can be implemented. It depends on our partners. I emphasize on partners. End quote. Unfortunately, not every Western partner is ready, willing, or able to provide everything that Kyiv is asking for in the plan. In that case, you ain't going to get Ukrainian victory. And this is the point. If you genuinely want Ukraine to be victorious as soon as possible, then you need to do as much as possible as soon as possible to help them do that. This is all about political military will of allies. The Ukrainians have got that political and military will. They've got the will. And they're fighting on our behalf, remember. Anyway, the plan doesn't address challenges in Ukraine that many believe could be done without or with less foreign support and would help their position. Many Ukrainians want to hear from the president today what their role in the plan is. Well, this is a problem, is that you can either do a mass mobilization of Ukrainians, in which case you're going to have 18-year-olds being mobilized, not 18 to 25-year-old men being ring-fenced to protect that generation and education and training. You just everyone, and then so you can whinge all you like, but if you're whinging that Ukraine should do more, then that means a mass mobilization of everyone. If fair enough, if you're cool with that, but I don't know, it's a bit woolly here to go that Ukrainians are wondering what more they can do. Well, go and fight. So either go and fight or shut up. So the victory plan has 5 points, as we know. So unconditional NATO invitation now, defense strengthening Ukraine's military by streaming in new weapons, lifting restriction on the use of long-range weapons and real-time satellite and intel data. Right, if you've got Western nations complaining about this victory plan because of point 2, then they can just jog on, because that's obviously what Ukraine needs. More weapons, ability to strike it deep into Russia, and latest intelligence through satellite imagery. Obvious. That, to me, that's not even, shouldn't even be in points 1 to 5. That should be like, well, this is obviously what's going to happen. Now what we're going to do with it. 1 to 5 should be, that's your foundation. How are we going to use this to get victory? The idea that this is one of your things that you need for victory is so bloody obvious. 3, deterrence, a secret, comprehensive non-nuclear strategic deterrence package that's been shared with the US, UK, France, Italy, and Germany. 4, strategic economic potential, joint protection of Ukraine's critical resources, as well as joint investment and use of this economic potential. This involves natural resources and critical metals worth trillions of US dollars, including uranium, titanium, lithium, graphite. Interesting. I've talked about natural resources. Some people have attacked me saying, oh, Russia aren't interested in that, blah, blah, blah. That's not really defining what they're doing. I think it would definitely be a component, and it's one of the sweeteners for the West. But here are our natural resources. If you want lithium to power up your technological revolution, we can help you out there, guys. Ukraine can be an important part. And if you don't want to rely on China for that lithium, Ukraine can help you there, guys. Thank you very much. And 5th, European security post-war. Ukraine military could station experienced troops in Europe, as I talked about yesterday. Important to note, amid the talks and reporting about potential future negotiations, Zelensky said he does not want to freeze the war, and Ukraine is not trading Ukraine's territory or sovereignty to bring Russia's invasion to an end. Besides hinging on a significant increase in Western support, there are several factors that may impact the plan, including how the wars in the Middle East develop, yep, and the US elections next month, yep, absolutely. So there you go. There's my rant on that. Some news coming from Germany that Sarah Wagenknecht, she is the leader of the BSW. In fact, I think the W in BSW, the political party, is Wagenknecht, if I'm correct. She's a far left leader. She is officially a Russian puppet, or at least the new court ruling has said that she can be criticized for her pro-Russian attitude and her acceptance of Russia's war. and this does not constitute a mischaracterization of her position. In other words, legally, she has been found to be someone of pro-Russian attitude, someone accepting of Russia's war. In other words, she is, from a legal point of view, a Russian puppet. So there you go. I don't know, that was interesting. Head of Rosatom, Alexei Likachev, had a meeting with the Serbian government regarding high-tech projects in Serbia. In case you were wondering where Serbia were getting their bread buttered, it appears to be in the Kremlin. So there you go. Serbia under the sphere of influence of the Russians there. Now, going back to Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, saying, and again, sorry that I'm all over the place, I could lick a shed instead of a chef. So yeah, okay, maybe that's a little bit healthier. I can't support Zelensky's whole victory plan, says Mark Rutte. However, NATO will meet its 40 billion euro military aid target for Ukraine. What he's saying there is Ukraine's immediate accession to NATO, if it is in the realms of being an unconditional NATO invitation, my view is that there should be some compromise and they should get a conditional NATO membership with a view to becoming unconditional at a later stage, a full membership at a later stage. Interesting from Benny Pye. Benny has actually, he's very interested in places like Moldova, Serbia. He's visited there a number of times. He helps me out on the channel a lot. So thanks, Benny. He's a legend. So in fact, we just written an article together on AI that's going to be out on Only Sky soon. I wonder is it out already, Ben? Anyway, Serbia are less under the, because I'm not busy enough already that I just, take on writing an article. Serbia are less under the influence than they were. Definitely some softening towards the West going on. We've seen a bit of, Serbia have taken on some French Rafales, haven't they? And that is, I think, a sign that the West is trying to cozy up to Serbia, get Serbia on side, but at the same time, Serbia are very good at speaking out both sides of their mouth. But interesting. Thanks for your opinion, Benny. Julianne Smith questions the first point in Zelensky's victory plan. So we're back to this. We are not at the stage where NATO is ready to invite Ukraine in the near term, said the US ambassador to NATO, Julianne Smith. So remember, like the work I do for my videos usually puts all of these neatly in little pockets of topicness. So yeah, I'm flipping all over the shop. Then we're back to Robert Fico. There's a very high likelihood of the war in Ukraine ending soon, says Slovak PM Robert Fico. He hinted that, quote, and this is super worrying or interesting, not quite sure. He hinted that, quote, something could be revealed tomorrow as the topic of inviting Ukraine to NATO suddenly emerges. So is this Fico being on the Russian side or actually being on Ukraine's side and saying, well, actually, if they do get this kind of NATO accession or some kind of compromise there, then the war could be over sooner than we might have thought. But that's almost certainly going to involve freezing of lines to some extent, and then having a fallback of NATO to stop Russia from taking further chunks out of Ukraine's territory. Okay, right. Moving on. Right, this was interesting, very interesting as far as I'm concerned. Now, guys, that I have often said that Jordan Peterson, people like Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, I know some of you guys might love Jordan Peterson. I'm not a fan as a liberal lefty, right? But I know that he floats a lot of people's boats, and I've seen some of my mates who absolutely love Jordan Peterson. And then he was their access into going further and further. And actually, some of my mates are sitting now quite far right. And I see these people as what I call gateway drugs to the alt-right. And I get criticism for that from people who love Jordan Peterson. Now, you might not be someone like that. You might love Jordan Peterson, but are able to compartmentalize and not go down that rabbit hole. But I know an awful lot of people who do. And Jordan Peterson has just, by the way, been at one of the rallies in Washington, D.C. in support, basically, of Russia. He is an anti-Ukraine Russian shill. So you may like him for what he says about cleaning your room or, whatever in the manosphere. But he is a Russia shill. He was also anti-vax as well and had some interesting views there. Now, Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, and I'm sure that that many of you will know much more about what's going on in Canada at the moment. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going on politically in Canada with Poilievre or Poilievre. I can't remember how it's spelt, but you've got this. Is it Peter Poilievre, who is on the political right in Canada against Justin Trudeau, and there's all these investigations, and then there's connections between the assassination attempts through Indian entities into Canada. And I don't understand what's going on because I don't have enough headspace. But there's all sorts of political fallout going on in Canada right now. Right. I'm sure I'm going to get some messages from the mate Viewchart, who often talk to me about this. So Justin Trudeau came out yesterday and claimed that during a testimony on the Foreign Interference Commission. So they're looking at foreign interference into Canada, Russia, India, etc., that Russia sought to highlight divisions in Canada is exactly what I talked about before, which is find a division, amplify it, drive a wedge into a crack, make that crack become a chasm. That is how you interfere with foreign nations. It's what Russia has been doing for a long time now. They've done that in the US and they've had great success in the US. This is Trudeau saying they've done this in Canada as well. And he's accused Dr. Jordan Peterson and Tucker Carlson of taking funding from the Russian government through its state broadcaster RT, so Russia Today. This is interesting. And he's also elsewhere. Let's have a look. During testimony at the Foreign Interference Commission on Wednesday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Russia of amplifying the chaos. Perfect way of putting it. Surrounding the 2022 Freedom Convoy. So do you remember in Canada, there was that anti-vax convoy of truckers who were basically mobilized far right or alt-right people generally, or populist. It was this right-wing populist movement. The Freedom Convoy protest also claimed Dr. Jordan Peterson and American journalist Tucker Carlson are being funded by Russian state broadcaster. When asked about Russia's role in a protest, Trudeau said, quote, he certainly agrees that Russia amplified the chaos, disagreements and divisions in Canada surrounding the convoy. Prime Minister also said, quote, Russian activities related to propaganda, disinformation and misinformation are quite constant in our social media and within Canadian democracy, adding that Russian propaganda also, quote, greatly amplified anti-vaccine messaging during the time as well, especially in the right-wing media. After the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war, quote, we saw many of these channels shift to pro-Putin propaganda, Trudeau said. He also asserted that Dr. Jordan Peterson and Tucker Carlson were also on Russia's payroll. Quote, we recently saw that RT is funding right-wing bloggers and YouTube personalities in North America, Trudeau said, seemingly referring to RT allegedly funding an influence operation, quote, including well-known names like Jordan Peterson or Tucker Carlson to amplify messages that destabilize democracies. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And I think big names need to be outed more. I would like Tucker Carlson to be investigated myself, personally. I think there's no doubt that he's connected massively to Russia. I've already explained that his father is the chair of the lobbying firm whose main client is Viktor Orban for Hungary. Right, that's Tucker Carlson's dad. So, Tucker Carlson is often interviewing Orban or over in Hungary or advocating for Hungary. There are these connections that need to be outed. Right. Okay, we are going to go next to, okay, we've done that. Okay, we are going to, not that, so I'm going to move some things around. I'm in a little bit of a pickle here as to what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so just to let you know that Twitter, I use Twitter an awful lot. It's an amazing platform for aggregating all the information in the world, literally the world. Why Facebook was successful is because everyone was on it. The point of Facebook was you wanted to be where everyone was. So at that time of its height, everyone was there. So you didn't need Friends Reunited. You didn't need this and that. everyone was on Facebook, and that's how you find and connect with people. With Twitter, it's the same kind of thing. So for someone like me who is aggregating news, I need all the news sources to be on Twitter. I need the open source intelligence community to be on Twitter. I need Ukrainians and Russians to be on Twitter, people fighting, or people taking stuff from Telegram and putting it on Twitter. I don't want to be going to 6 different platforms all day long trying to get all my sources. I want all my sources in one place, curate a list of sources, and use that to inform you guys and to inform myself and then you guys. Twitter is amazing for that, right? Because all the politicians are there, the journalists are there, everyone is there whose opinions that I need, and all the facts that I need are aggregated there. So it is amazing, but at the same time, it is also horrific. Twitter is also an absolute dive full of bots and trolls. Elon Musk said he was going to come and sort that out. He hasn't. In fact, it's got worse. The recent report is that Twitter is the worst of the social media places for Russian disinformation and manipulation. The Russians themselves have said that this is the one place that we can still affect because it's not coming down hard on us. So that is, I think, indisputably the case. I can point out to you right now, if I really wanted, I can go on Twitter and point out 100 different troll and bot accounts that would be obviously, in my eyes, Russian, right? So my desire is that the owner of Twitter does something to fight against that. But instead, he's doing the exact opposite. And one of the things he's doing at the moment is getting rid of the block function, where you can block people and they can't see what you've written, blah, 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 and you can't interact with them. He's changing it so that there are some theories that he has realized that so many people have blocked him that he doesn't want to be blocked, and he still wants to throw his voice down their throats irrespective of that. So that's one theory as to why he's doing that. There's another theory that actually the block function is really complicated. Well, let's go and look at some of these things going on, because this is really important, because this is about Russian disinformation. So this isn't just me whinging about Twitter. This is directly about Russian disinformation. So Tom Nichols says, so thinking about this, I suspect that the new block, which is basically just an enhanced mute, is just a way to make it much harder for you to prevent trolls from seeking engagement. Block took them out of the conversation. This other thing will let them harass people in your timeline. So you can block people, but they can still harass your timeline. It's just that you can't see them, but they can be on there, still messing around and still disinforming your followers. So in other words, if I blocked Elon Musk, he could still actually come onto my timeline and harass me, but I just wouldn't know about it, type thing. In practice, he says that means blocking them out of the conversation will be a kind slow-mo thing instead of a one-shot deal, and some people will not be able to resist replying, so trolls will get a chance to farm some engagement. Of course, this could all just be Musk's paper-thin skin too, which cannot stand the idea that he and other debate me bro nerds are not allowed to listen in when the other kids are talking at the lunch table. So this could be Musk still elbowing himself into conversations and threads where he's otherwise been blocked. But either way, this is allowing bots and trolls further engagement farming. So that's where they just seek engagement, and they say provocative things so people engage with them, and that puts them up the algorithm so that they get more and more amplification of what they say. Rage farming is another way of looking at it. Thomas Tyner, who's a great advocate for Ukraine, says 90% of ads on this app are scams. 90% of blue checks are engagement farming Nazis. Of course, Elon Musk wants to get rid of the block function to flood our timeline with all this bullshit. So this is Twitter saying soon we'll be launching a change to how the block function works. If your posts are set to public, accounts you've blocked will be able to view them, but they will not be able to engage, like reply, repost, etc., etc. So lots of people trying to work this out. Someone here saying thinking likes deserve to be private, but blocked accounts have the right to still look at your tweets. I don't know. This smells like it was all catered for a very specific people. So what this is, so what happened is Elon Musk got a bit perturbed that people were able to find out who you would like. So you got lots of politicians getting in trouble for liking the far right, and then newspaper articles come out saying this person liked this, which is, I think, what we should. I think it was a really useful thing to know. What do you like as a person? What are you liking? Because that tells us who you are and the sort of people that you appreciate, which gives us an insight into your actual ideology. Musk then made that private because lots of people on the far right started getting into trouble. So again, this tells us more about Musk and tells us more about where he wants a platform to go. So he's basically saying, right now you can't see what people are liking, so that people can get away with liking Nazi stuff and not getting into trouble for that. And then the block feature seems to, or the change in the block functionality seems to benefit Russian bots and trolls again, or bots and trolls from anywhere. Andrew Perpetua says Twitter isn't getting rid of block because Elmo has some free speech bullshit. They aren't getting rid of block because Elmo has had his feelings hurt. They're getting rid of block because it's one of the most computationally demanding features on the platform. So he's got a slightly different view. He disagrees. And the rampant increase in bot accounts has caused more people to block more things. He's actually saying that this is a problem of the bot accounts. Block has become much more of an issue because there are so many bots. But rather than get rid of the bots, he's getting rid of block. That's the key move. So instead of getting rid of the reasons people have two block accounts, they're getting rid of the block to save money because Elmo is running the company into the ground. Either way, whichever way you look at it, it is to the benefit of bots and trolls. So why I've had a whole section on this is because this is one of my major sources of news, and it's brilliant for that, but it is also rife with disinformation and trolls and bots. And presently, Elon Musk is doing everything he can to improve the experience of bots and trolls. And he's doing everything he can to make disinformation easier to propagate. And he's making disinformation much more likely to fester and spread contagiously throughout this platform. And that is only to the benefit of people like Putin. End of rant. If you're still a big fan of Elon Musk, I mean, great, he's good with rockets and stuff, brilliant. He can be that and also be a grade A tool bag, which he also is. Good on rockets, bad on humanity. But there you go. Yeah, Andrew has a point, says Viggo. I think he does. I think, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for all of that. I sorry if this wasn't what you were expecting, but I do appreciate that you've stuck it out and that we've learned a bit more about what's going on. Sorry it was all a bit disjointed. Richard Bennett gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate that. By the way, what I want to say before we kind of wrap this thing up, if you guys haven't been on ATPgeo.com, ATPgeo.com, they both go to the same place, then you haven't lived. So this is my ATP Distilled, and I have to say the incredible quality of the AI summarizing in this is insane. It's something to behold. So we're going to go on to the Australian one here. When I did my bad Australian accent, by the way, some Aussies said that's a pretty good accent. Other people said it's a terrible accent. So it's a bit like Vegemite, right? You either love it or hate it, right? So what it does, it takes my videos and it puts them into summaries. And here it starts with Jonathan welcomes viewers in his usual humorous style with an exaggerated Australian accent, referencing the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese. It even knows, the AI knows I am having a bit of a laugh with the accent. I think that's absolutely incredible. And then later that day, I think I did some French. Did I not do some French, a French accent in one of my videos? And I think it picks up on that as well. Let's look at the France bit. France unable to meet full. So blah 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 blah. Oh no, it's maybe not on this bit. It might be another French one I had. But anyway, there was it did exactly the same thing, and it can just pick up incredible nuances in what I say, which I think is just brilliant. Yeah, Yeah, I here France tests and will supply kamikaze drones to Ukraine. Is that what we've got, Sebastian Lecornu? No, it's not. So there was another one about. Here it is. Jonathan, after a brief humorous interlude with some French phrases, reports that French Defense Minister Sebastian Lecornu has announced the successful testing of France's first remote control munition, also known as a kamikaze drone. Right. So if you don't have a chance to watch my videos, but you're sitting at work, you can't listen to them, or you can't watch it because you're working on another screen, or whatever, you can read them, and you can read my videos, and the AI is good enough. Like Benny Pie has done such a good job on training the AI with all this 170 lines of telling the AI how to summarize my videos, and you know, making sure that the spelling as much as possible is in Ukrainian spelling, etc., etc. He's trained it really well, and it can pick out when I'm trying to be funny, when I'm just being a douche. It knows that after a brief humorous interlude, and you can read that, and then you can imagine me doing that. So that's really nice. Anyway, I think it's absolutely brilliant. So please check out what is going on ATP Geo. So just there you go. It's just really, really clever. And at the moment, we have the distillation of all of my videos summarized. And we also have other things like the ISW summarized, Institute for the Study of War report summarized, and all sorts of things. And you can search all on my videos. If you know that I've talked about something like, I wonder if you put Muppet. Who have I called a Muppet? Let's see that. Oh, it didn't like that. It's searching. An error occurred. I think that's probably too general. So it's something like Viktor Orban. Let's hope that this does work now. No, it's not. Oh, search isn't working. Search is usually really, really good. I can't believe I just tried to show you that live, and it's just had a bit of a puppy. But anyway, usually the search will give you all the videos where I've talked about Viktor Orban, and all the videos where even if you put in something like Muppet, because I've done that before. But apologies, it wasn't quite working then. Anyway, thanks for all of your support. I just want to say thank you to Da Vinci. He has a question. So, is liberating all of occupied Ukraine the same as Russia losing the war? If so, the Kremlin won't take that very well. This is a really good point, Da Vinci, and thank you for your support there. What does winning look like for Ukraine? And will that ever be anything that Russia accepts? And so when we talk about negotiation, could this be, this is actually a really important point to end the video on. This demands almost an entire video on its own. Are the outcomes for both sides so divergent that you simply cannot have a successful negotiation? The nature of compromise means that no side is perfectly happy. That's what compromise is. So whatever happens in negotiations, Russia will want something out of Ukraine, and Ukraine will want all of their territory back, and Russia to bugger off. But Russia aren't going to want to do that, and Ukraine aren't going to want to do what Russia wants. So the compromise is always going to be difficult to swallow for either side. What does it look like? You know, all of occupied Ukraine going back to Ukraine would be utterly unacceptable for Russia. So the only way that Russia could accept that would be a complete collapse of the Russian regime, or a complete collapse of their army, so they get absolutely smashed. But if the Russian army got absolutely smashed, I would have thought that'd be the point that they'll be bringing out the tactical nukes, possibly. But this is I think important, because we need to understand how difficult it is going to be, that even with negotiations, even with Ukraine in a power position, for Ukraine to get back their 1991 borders. Maybe that could have happened if Ukraine were giving everything they needed at the time that they needed it most. But right now, I wonder if there will have to be some kind of compromise of territory. Now, the key is going to be Crimea, Zaporizhia, and Kherson as well. Like, you can imagine that the Donbass might be allowed to remain in Russian hands, but is Crimea a deal breaker for either side? And if it's a deal breaker for either side, are we just going to come to an impasse? And then for the Ukrainians, of course, it's not just about what people are deciding in these negotiating halls, because that is different. For Russia, it's whatever Kremlin and his Putin and his cronies decide in a meeting room. Russian population don't give a toss about what outcome, exactly what outcome is generated by the negotiations, because Putin will be able to sell that as some kind of win, and it's just like whatever. They're not really vested. They live in Russia for a start. They don't have a vested interest in these places in Ukraine. Now, the Russians living in Ukraine might, but that's a whole different kettle of fish, I think. But for the Ukrainians, Zelensky can't just go into the negotiating chamber and then negotiate away people's houses and property and territory and negotiate on behalf of Ukraine without, I think, considering the Ukrainian population's wishes. And there's an asymmetry there. So I think the negotiations would have to have the buy-in of the Ukrainian population for Ukraine, but won't have to have the buy-in of the Russian population for Russia. That is a fundamental difference. So I think it then that's an added layer of complexity for the Ukrainians when it comes to Zelensky and his cronies or his people doing the negotiating. And it's not so easy as saying, okay, you can keep hold of the Donbass and we'll have Crimea. It's like, well, what do the Ukrainian population think about that? And all the people that used to live there that want to go back to their houses or whatever, or parts of Donetsk, parts of Luhansk, you can't just give that away. Whereas I think Putin can just give whatever part of occupied Ukraine he's thinking about away, or keep it, or whatever, because the wishes of the people that live there or Russians are kind of irrelevant to Putin. He is a dictator. Zelensky's not a dictator, and he's doing things with and on behalf of and for the Ukrainian people. Putin is doing things for himself and on behalf of his vision of what the Russian Empire should be. Hopefully that answers your question, Davinci. Thanks. It's really, I should talk more about that, because I keep promising to do a kind of end game video. What does success look like? And it's such a difficult question, because everyone will have different ideas about what success should be, but also what it's realistically likely going to be. Those are two very different things. Laser Hobbyist says, don't forget to put your thumbs up. I presume thumbs, but you can put your thumb up if you want. I've lost my thumb. I used to have two of them just over there by my CD collection. It's on top of it, but I've lost them. But I definitely will put my thumbs up. Laser Hobbyist, you are a freaking legend. Thank you, my man or woman. I really appreciate that support for the channel, and please do like, subscribe, and share. It's really important, I believe, for traction for the channel. And yeah, there you go. Right, I don't know if you're talking to me, Chris. That's a good summary. It's tricky though, like you say, but I agree. And Adam Bennett, GG. Good game, Jonathan. As a long-time lurker, thanks for all you do. I love a bit of long-time lurkers. Thank you for lurking. And I know there's probably a lot more lurkers out there than I realise, or at least I hope so. And thanks to all the non-lurkers like Mark Bisque. Thank you, Mark. You're an absolute freaking legend. Russia does not and has never known the meaning of negotiations. This is a really important thing, Mark. And thank you for your support, as ever. But also, really good point, because actually, they don't do negotiations. I read a book by Owen Matthews called Overreach, which is really good. I shared my reading list with you the other day. In that, he talks about how the one time that they met in 2019, Zelensky met with Putin, and it was someone who was in that meeting said it was clear from that meeting that Putin had never done negotiations, because he had never had to negotiate. Putin is a dictator who just gets what he wants. So if you think about what goes on in say the politics in the UK, right? You've got Labour, you've got Tories, you've got Lib Dem, you've got the Green Party, you've got the SNP, you've got Plaid Cymru, you've got all these different parties, and the nature of politics is this constant wrangling and negotiating between these different parties to try and get what you want, so you get enough votes to vote it through in Parliament. Like, the whole thing is about compromise, isn't it? And okay, we'll change this to keep you happy, and then we'll put that in to keep you happy, and then okay, Putin is like, this is what I want to happen, and you guys in the Duma, you're going to do what I say, and everyone goes okay, and then you put the pretense of democracy on top of it. So he's never had the experience of negotiating. So it's a really interesting point that, okay, well, how does that work when he's forced to go to the negotiating table for one reason or another, or opts to go to the negotiating table? He's never had the experience of negotiating properly. He is just going to demand he gets what he wants, and if he doesn't get what he wants, he's going to take his football and go home. Right, I'm off. You're not playing with my ball anymore. So even if it does get to negotiations, there's a very strong possibility that it ain't going to go far, because that's what Putin is like. Really good point, Mark. That's why I like having people like you around. It's a concept they are incapable of understanding. For Russia, negotiations mean you are ready to accept their terms. It's a really good point. So when we there's several times earlier on in this war, we've had overtures from the Russians like, oh, we're up for negotiating. And I said at the time, if they are saying they're up for negotiating, it means they are in the ascendancy, or they have the power position. You don't want to go negotiate then. And this is why Zelensky says we need to have success on the battle. The battlefield is part of the negotiating table, and you do your initial negotiations on the battlefield. That's where you play yourself into having a strong hand. So Ukraine need to succeed as much as possible on the battlefield, so that when they do go to the negotiating table, they are able to force Russia into capitulating to their will. But of course, Russia are not going to want to do that, and they're going to want the opposite of that. So everyone's throwing everything they can at the battlefield right now, so that if negotiations are forced upon each side in the next 2 or 3 months, each side is in the upper position, in the power position, but they're both just smashing each other into like attritional oblivion at the moment. And Russia are marginally, well, actually with Kursk, not necessarily so. So now Kursk has been taken, and they're able to hold on to it at least somewhat at the moment. Then that is a pretty major bargaining chip. Because I was going to say Russia are still grinding away that into a greater position of power, and they probably are on balance still anyway. But how long they're able to do that? Will they crumble, and then will something happen rather quickly, or are we just going? Is this a very long and protracted period? So thank you very much, by the way, JR, total legend. Thanks, JR, who's helped me so much on the mapping, the automation of the mapping, and he changed the model yesterday, and I was able to do the mapping at like 1 o'clock last night. JR, ledge. In the context of peace and the end of the war, a video about Russia and predictions on when various resources might run out, would also be appreciated. Yes. I'm not an expert on their resources, but there are some. I think there's Econ Time, is it? Or what's there's a channel that does wargaming predictions, like literal war games, as in like hex war games where you actually play a game. But he's taking the modeling of war games and how you use resources and applied that to Russia, and done some modeling of when Russia will run out of resources, and how that is impacted by military successes or failures, and I guess things like oil refineries and depots being hit, etc., etc. I don't know if I know enough about that, but it certainly could be something I can maybe check that guy out and do an interview. I am often wondering about when resources will run out, because I just can't believe that they keep going on. But the difference that Russia has is they don't have this threshold, and this is what Zelensky said after the lack of success in the counteroffensive of May 2023 onwards. Zelensky came out and said, right, we've got a few things wrong. First of all, we thought we were going to take 30 kilometers a day. they took 30 centimeters a week, didn't they? So 30 kilometers a day was just absolutely fantastical. And of course, that was minefields, fortifications, ATGMs, helicopters, aviation, etc., etc. So, yeah, Zelensky got it wrong. He said that we thought we were going to take 30 kilometers a day, but he also said, and this was key, that we thought the Russians would capitulate, that they would give up at a much earlier stage due to attritional losses. Now that I know people love Zelensky, but he actually admitted some fairly significant shortfalls there in his own calculations. Now we can wonder why those calculations were made, but I know it's easy to hold Zelensky up as some kind of awesome guy and Syrskyi as some butcher or whatever. My guess is they probably both have strengths and weaknesses, and don't give Zelensky a free pass because he seems like a really nice guy. He may have made some bad decisions, and that's why he ended up going. I don't know, but just all I'm saying is don't inoculate yourself from criticizing, or don't allow him to be inoculated from criticism. He said that threshold, they miscalculated that threshold. That is a huge miscalculation, because actually, not only did they not give up there, as Ukraine attrited them down to this level, it's like we thought they would have given up there by then, and that was part of our calculations for doing this attack, or this offensive. Actually, they didn't only not give up then, they've gone further down to here, and they still haven't given up. That difference is huge. And in fact, they're getting people from North Korea. So it's like, well, it's like miscalculating that they didn't. And, that's understandable. Who would have calculated that they would be bringing North Korean soldiers? Possibly, we don't know. But it could be that North Korean soldiers have been brought in. KN-23 North Korean ballistic missiles, that half of the Russian artillery ammunition is North Korean. That's not something that Zelensky could, or that's not something he did predict, and he got that wrong. And do we hold him accountable for that? I mean, this is it, because what we do is we project our own kind of beliefs onto others, don't we? And so I think probably what Zelensky did, and you can understand that, was project, which is, as a Ukrainian commander that cares about the lives of my soldiers, I would give up if we lost like 40% of our troops in this time period. The Russians did that, and it just kept on going. Like, I am projecting my own, but I would have given up by then. Like, well, the value of the lives of my people are worth more than. No, Russians didn't. And maybe that was short-sighted, because you only need to go to the Second World War to see 26 million Russians died. 26 million Russians died. Okay, various numbers depending on who you believe. But let's say 26 million. What's the actual, so they're prepared to expend huge numbers of people and resources in order to achieve their objectives. So now, looking at the situation, what's going on now, the interesting point at the moment, and sorry, I'm amazed that you're still here listening to me just stream of consciousness, there's a slightly different situation now than 1945 or whatever, 1940s, is that the population has social media, and so they are able to see the war, see the horrors of the war, and also try and understand an objective version of history that they might get from outside, in order to see what's going on and say, actually, that's not a great idea. Yeah, we're not too cool about that. This isn't the Russians defending their home, their motherland, from a Nazi invasion. This is the Russians invading another country. So we have a really big difference. So where they were prepared to put 26 million people into defending their motherland, are they prepared to put a huge amount of people into, are they prepared to sacrifice a vast number of people into some kind of narcissistic, imperialistic fever dream of a megalomaniacal dictator? I don't know. So I guess the Kremlin realizes this, and Putin realizes this. So what do? They shut down the internet. They shut down YouTube. They shut down. They build up another curtain. This iron curtain, but it's an informational curtain around the Russian population to, as they see it, protect them from the truth of the outside world, so that they can keep perpetuating this war and sending those troops to die in Ukraine. And in the absence of those troops, because actually people have run away and you've got a labor force shortage, then we can get North Koreans in either to work in the factories, so because we sent our factory workers to the war, or to work as soldiers, and we can get Iran to help us, and then we can get people from Sri Lanka and Nepal and Cape Verde Islands, and it's just still as many people as possible to keep feeding them into this war machine, to keep this war going on as long as possible, because we can't lose. Because as I told you before, this war is intrinsically existentially, Putin is existentially connected to the outcome of this war in a way that Zelensky isn't. So if Ukraine lose a war, Zelensky either goes and lives in Lviv because they get to keep part of Ukraine, or he goes and moves to the US or whatever. If Putin loses a war, he'll be deposed, and that's the end of him. So he can't lose a war. So then this goes back to the negotiation question. It's like, is Putin likely to go to negotiate? Well, if he, and this is the question, like one of you said, which is, this is Da Vinci, I think, saying, is liberating all of occupied Ukraine the same as Russia losing the war? If so, the Kremlin won't take that very well. If he doesn't come out of negotiations with a clear win for Russia in a way that he can sell that to his public, then he will be deposed. There will either be a revolution, or possibly, or there will be a coup. So he's going to be looking at those negotiations as something where he doesn't know how to negotiate. But now we're going to add in this idea that he actually can't negotiate, because if he doesn't win out of this, then he's dead or in a gulag. So you add that into the equation, and actually the negotiations become even more difficult for Ukraine to come out of this, looking good and having what they want to some degree. Yeah. Thanks, JL. Really good of you there, my good man. So yeah, I probably do have to do a video on that. That's really kind of you, Mikey from Cambridge. The West needs to support the Ukrainian people through to victory. 12 more months and Putin's economy will be failing. His economy is failing now. There are lots of signs of it absolutely being in trouble. But when you're a dictatorship, or when you're a dictator, you are able to kind of fudge the stats. You're able to, like I've said, there's an iron curtain going up around Russia, so that information doesn't get in, but also you're starving your own population of information. So they've stopped producing economic statistics, or very few statistics get through. But broadly speaking, they've stopped producing economic statistics, so that the general population and the international community don't really know what's going on in the Russian economy, and that's because it will be tanking. So there are lots of indicators of the Russian economy being in super trouble. Now, this war is a war of attrition. Like I said on a previous video, it's a war of attrition on the battlefield, personnel and equipment, and it's a war of attrition in the economy. So whose economy gets attrited first, and which economy has greater support? So the Ukrainians are looking, and part of the victory plan is economic support ongoing from allied nations, but they're also getting that support now from the EU, from the US, from the UK, from Japan, from Canada, etc. They are getting support. What are Russia getting? They're getting trade economic support, but they're not getting like handouts from other countries or massive loans and whatnot. In fact, they can't even trade in the ruble at the moment, and they don't really want the rupee, and so they're doing things like bartering between nations and stuff. So Russian economy is in a great deal of in a spot of bother at the moment. The question is, when is that tipping point? When will things become so untenable for the Kremlin to be able to keep prosecuting the war in terms of having the money to do that, but also the general population's life, welfare, economic prospects, hopes of aspirations. If they start losing all of that, then you are going to have a very unhappy population. The flip side of that is the Russians are still pretty good at getting on with life, even with a pretty terrible terrible lot on their plate, right? So they are not used to doing democracy, and they have a much greater penchant, I would have thought, for being screwed over by the Kremlin than us. So for us, if you look at the poll tax riots and things like that in the UK, like you start doing that, we're going to go out in the streets and start smashing stuff up, right? The Russians seem to be much more used to just living under autocracy the entire freaking time. But yeah, just one thing before I keep promising that I'm going to go. Your man has fixed the search function. So Benny Pie has obviously said, right, I can't have that. What's gone wrong with the search function? Let's see if it works. Orban. There you go. So it does work. There, all of these videos, these are the transcripts from the videos where I've mentioned Orban. And indeed, let's try that again. So please go and check out ATP Geo, ATP Distilled, Muppet. There you go. 152 results for Muppet. So I wonder who I was talking about for being Marjorie Taylor Greene. There you go. Of course. Elon Musk. Of course. Jonathan discusses a now deleted tweet by Elon Musk's mother, where she encouraged people to vote multiple times under fake names. He criticizes her for promoting voter fraud and then attempting to backtrack with a flimsy excuse. Brilliant. And I might well have called her a Muppet in that, but it also is such a clever enough AI trained thing that it recognizes what Muppet means. It knows what I mean by that, and then looks at people who have done things that would qualify for me calling them a Muppet. So it may not be that I called Elon Musk's mother a Muppet, but it knows what I mean by that and is picking out stuff where I have done similar. So clever. As I said, I've just written an article with Benny on AI, using his expertise to help, get my head around AI. It's amazing. So we're going to be doing a series of articles on AI and the potential pitfalls, but also the great things that AI could give us as humanity. So, it's not to do with the Ukraine war, but actually AI we probably will write an article on the impact of AI on the war in Ukraine. I think that'd be really interesting. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Not literally, of course. That's ridiculous. Unless you want some kind of cornea transplant, then you might want to literally peel your eyes. Sometimes I need to shut up. So this is probably one of those times. Thank you very much for putting up with me. Thank you for listening to my interview with Stephen Bendel. It's been really great. Thank you, Stephen. I think you've been a great guest. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've just been talking to you guys. Thank you for that. Thanks for being there. Take care, everybody. And I really appreciate all the people that supported Mark Bizq, Laser Hobbyist, Johnny Christensen, Da Vinci, Johnny Nedregard, Kevin Forst, Johnny Nedregard, Richard Bennett, JR, and Mikey from Cambridge. Thank you all, one and all, legends. And finally, of course, remember the stolen children, Von Rees. Absolutely. Thanks for your super sticker. And indeed, this is something I don't think I talk about enough. And I know Ukraine, the latest podcast, often says that they need to keep that in the spotlight big time. It is a really important part of this war. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.